My mother-in-law demanded half my business. Then she showed up with her whole family to force me into submission. But I had the last laugh, and then I built my bakery from the ground up with my own two hands, pouring everything I had into it. Long nights, early mornings, and every dollar I could spare. There was no inheritance, no business loan from a generous benefactor, no lucky break that set me up for success. I spent 8 exhausting years perfecting recipes, juggling bills, and working 70-hour weeks to make my dream a reality. Now it's thriving. People drive in from other cities just to try my pastries. Food bloggers write about it. Local magazines have featured my story more than once. It's my pride and joy, the one thing in my life that I built completely on my own. Then I married Lucas, and suddenly, it wasn't mine anymore. When I met him, he seemed steady, reliable, and supportive, the kind of man who wasn't flashy but dependable, which I thought was more important. He worked as an accountant, had a quiet confidence about him, and always encouraged me when I was exhausted from work. I believed we were partners. I believed he was proud of what I had built. But after the wedding, it became clear that I hadn't just married him. I had unknowingly married his mother, Elaine, as well. Elaine is the type of woman who walks into a room and assumes she's in charge simply because she exists. She corrects people constantly, speaks over them without realizing it, and plays the victim whenever she isn't the center of attention. Every conversation with her turns into a passive-aggressive battle where she acts like she's just making an observation while cutting you down. At first, it was minor things, offhand comments about how my bakery's decor was cute but a little amateur, or how I didn't dress like a successful businesswoman. Lucas always told me to ignore her, that she didn't mean anything by it. Then she started showing up at the bakery. At first, I thought she was just being a supportive mother-in-law, stopping by to check in and maybe buy something before heading home. But she didn't just stop by, she stayed. She'd sit in the corner with a group of her friends, loudly critiquing every single thing in my shop. She'd complain about the service, make comments about how certain pastries were a bit dry that day, and even whisper to her friends about how my employees weren't trained properly. The first time she walked behind the counter and started rearranging my supplies, I was so stunned that I didn't react right away. I told myself she was just trying to be helpful. The second time, I asked her politely to stay out of staff areas. She laughed like I had made some kind of adorable joke and told me she was just tidying up because things looked a little messy. When I insisted, she patted my arm like I was a child and said, "Oh, sweetheart, you know I just want you to succeed." That should have been the moment I put my foot down, but Lucas kept telling me to just let her be, because she's only trying to help. So I bit my tongue, thinking that as long as she wasn't actively hurting my business, I could put up with her presence. I didn't want unnecessary conflict. I didn't want to be the villain who told her husband's mother she wasn't welcome. I convinced myself it wasn't a battle worth fighting. Then, 2 months ago, she pushed too far. Lucas and I had invited her over for dinner, just a simple home-cooked meal to keep the peace. She showed up wearing a gaudy, oversized necklace, carrying a bottle of wine more expensive than our monthly car payment, and bragging about how she had treated herself to something special. I should have known she wasn't just there for a pleasant evening. I should have realized she had something planned the moment she sat down at the table and smirked like she was already the winner of a fight I didn't even know was happening. Halfway through dinner, completely out of nowhere, she said, "So, I've decided I should own half of your bakery." I actually laughed, thinking it was a joke, because no sane person would say something like that in real life. But she wasn't laughing. She leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine glass in her hand like she was some kind of queen making a decree, and smiled like she had just done me a favor. "You wouldn't have that business if you hadn't married my son. You owe us." I didn't respond right away because I was trying to process the sheer audacity of what I had just heard. Elaine took my silence as encouragement and continued, "You wouldn't have had the time or stability to run it without Lucas handling the house and the bills. That bakery exists because of him, so it only makes sense that our family has a stake in it." I looked at Lucas, expecting him to shut this down immediately, because surely he wasn't on board with this insanity. Surely, My own husband wouldn't let his mother sit there and demand ownership of something I built before I even met him. Lucas didn't look at me. He stared down at his plate, avoiding eye contact like a guilty child caught stealing cookies. Then, in a hesitant voice, he said, "Maybe you should just give her something, to keep the peace." To keep the peace. I felt something snap inside me. I had never asked Lucas to sacrifice anything for my sake. I had never asked him to put my needs above his own. I had supported him financially when he cut his work hours, never once complaining about it. I had paid for the majority of our expenses while he enjoyed his newfound free time. And now, he was asking me to just give his mother part of my business because it was easier than telling her no. Elaine wasn't finished. She leaned in like we were negotiating a deal, acting like I had already agreed to give her half of everything I built. "You should have papers drawn up," she said smoothly, giving me part ownership. "It's only fair, sweetheart. Family supports family. And with my experience in event planning, I could help your bakery grow beyond what you could ever do alone." Then, with the most infuriating little wink, she added, "And besides, it'll all be mine someday anyway." I clenched my hands under the table to keep from throwing my glass across the room. I forced a smile and said, "I'll think about it." Elaine sat back, smug, believing she had already won. Lucas looked relieved, thinking the conflict was over. But I wasn't thinking about how to give Elaine what she wanted. I was thinking about how to make her regret ever asking. The second Elaine left my house that night, I knew I would never let her get a single thing from me. Not my business. Not my time. Not my patience. I had spent years grinding to make my bakery what it was, and she thought she could just waltz in and take it because she felt entitled? The audacity of that woman was almost impressive. Almost. The moment I was alone, I grabbed my phone and called Mark, my older brother and my silent business partner. Years before I even met Lucas, Mark had invested in the bakery, helping me cover the final costs to secure my first location. In return, he held 20% of the business. No creative control, no interference. Just a cut of the profits and an ironclad contract protecting both of us. Mark also happened to be an excellent corporate lawyer. The second I told him what happened, he laughed out loud. "She really thinks she can just claim ownership because you married her son? That's actually insane." I leaned against the counter, rubbing my temples. Mark, she wasn't joking. She sat there, at my table, drinking my wine, and told me she had already decided she should own half. His amusement vanished instantly. "And what did Lucas say?" I hesitated. "He told me to just give her something to keep the peace." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a single exhale. "You need to get out of this marriage." I wasn't ready to hear that yet, so I changed the subject. "I need to make sure she can't pull any legal tricks. You're the only one I trust to handle this." Mark didn't hesitate. "I'll draft something tonight. She has no claim, but we're going to make damn sure she knows it." 3 days later, Elaine came striding into my bakery, practically glowing with victory, wearing an obnoxious fur-trimmed coat like we weren't in the middle of a humid spring in Charleston. Her smirk alone made my blood pressure spike. "So," she said, placing her perfectly manicured hands on the counter, "did you bring the paperwork?" I didn't say a word. I just slid the envelope across the counter. She opened it right there, her smile flickering the second she started reading. The first page was a letter drafted by Mark, explaining in clear, professional terms that she had absolutely no legal right to any part of my business. It also included a warning that any further harassment regarding ownership would result in legal action. The second page was a formal cease and desist notice. Her entire face turned red. By the time she reached the end of the second page, her hands were shaking. Then, in the middle of my bakery, in front of my staff, in front of my customers, she screamed. Not just a yell, not just an angry outburst. A full-bodied, furious, red-faced, high-pitched scream. The entire shop went dead silent. She pointed a trembling finger at me, her voice shaking with rage. "You ungrateful little." Lucas walked in right at that moment, eyes scanning the room, taking in the stunned customers, the frozen employees, the furious husk of his mother clutching a legal document with white-knuckled fingers. He went completely pale. I looked him right in the eyes and, in the calmest voice imaginable, asked, "So, this is the piece you wanted?" He didn't answer. Elaine stormed out, vowing to take me to court. Lucas didn't come home that night. I didn't care. I had already started making plans. The next morning, I woke up to 30 missed calls and messages from Lucas. At first, his texts were calm, trying to smooth things over, telling me I was overreacting. Then they turned desperate. "Please just apologize to her. You're making things worse. If you don't fix this, I don't know what will happen to us." I ignored every single message. When I arrived at my bakery, 2 of my employees were waiting outside, looking uneasy. One of them, Emily, held up her phone with a tight expression. "We thought you should see this." Elaine had gone nuclear. She had written a public Facebook post, tagging the bakery, telling the world that I was a fraud. According to her, I had used Lucas for financial security, and once my business became successful, I cut him and his family out like trash. She painted herself as the heartbroken matriarch, claiming Lucas had supported me through the hardest times, and now I was repaying him with betrayal. She begged for prayers, saying she had tried to be patient, but I had forced her hand. The post ended with, "It's just sad when family becomes greedy. Pray for us. #family first, #broken heart." The comment section was a disaster. All her little friends were chiming in, offering their support, vowing to boycott my bakery, spreading the lie that I had turned my back on my husband. I didn't cry. I didn't get mad. I just felt something cold and sharp settle inside me. This wasn't about her wanting a stake in my bakery. This was about control. Elaine wanted to humiliate me into handing it over. Lucas texted again an hour later. "Mom says she'll take the post down if you just give her 15%. It's not a big deal." That was the moment I realized something that changed everything. Lucas wasn't just spineless. He was part of it. A few days passed. I thought maybe they would let it go. Maybe, after realizing I wasn't backing down, they would move on. I should have known better. Elaine showed up again. This time, she didn't come alone. Lucas was with her. They both walked in like nothing had happened, as if she hadn't dragged my name through the mud online and tried to turn the entire community against me. Elaine smiled brightly, speaking loud enough for every customer to hear. "I hope you're ready for the family meeting tonight. We're going to sort out this little misunderstanding." I stared at Lucas, waiting for him to say something. Anything to contradict her. He nodded, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. That was the final straw. I said, "I won't be attending." Elaine's smile vanished instantly. She stepped closer, lowering her voice into a hiss. "You're going to regret this. You're embarrassing my son. Do you think anyone in this town is going to keep supporting your little shop once they hear how you treat your family?" I felt nothing. No fear. No hesitation. No anger. Just clarity. I said, "Get out." Elaine froze, like she couldn't comprehend someone telling her no. Lucas looked at the floor. Elaine gasped, "Excuse me." I repeated, "Both of you. Get out." They left, but I knew this wasn't over. Elaine was just getting started. The next morning, my bakery's online reviews started plummeting. At first, I thought maybe there had been a mistake, some kind of glitch that caused an influx of 1-star ratings all at once. But then I started reading them, and it became painfully obvious exactly what was happening. One review claimed a customer had found a cockroach baked into a muffin, which was ridiculous considering my bakery passed every health inspection with perfect scores. Another accused my staff of being rude and discriminatory, which made absolutely no sense since my employees were some of the kindest people you could ever meet. A few simply said the bakery was filthy and overpriced, written in nearly identical wording, as if they had all been copy-pasted from a script. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was behind it. Elaine wasn't even trying to hide her tracks. Some of the fake reviews were from her own friends, people who had never stepped foot inside my bakery. I recognized their names from her Facebook circle, the same group of older women who always commented on her posts, telling her she was a strong, devoted mother and that she deserved nothing but respect. I called Lucas, even though I knew it was pointless. He picked up on the third ring, his voice tired, like I was the one draining him emotionally. "This has to stop." My voice was calm, but ice cold. "Your mother is trashing my business online, and she's not even trying to be subtle about it. Lucas sighed like I was asking him to do something exhausting. She's upset, Jenna. She feels like you betrayed her. She just needs time to cool down. I actually laughed at how pathetic that sounded. Cool down? She's actively trying to destroy my business. That's not grieving or processing emotions. That's sabotage. He didn't respond right away, and I could hear the hesitation in his silence, like he was debating whether he should lie to me or just admit the truth. Jenna, I think you're blowing this out of proportion. Something inside me just shut off completely. Lucas, do you seriously not see what's happening? She's spreading lies. She's manipulating people. She's telling the entire town that I used you for financial security, when you've been working part-time for the past 2 years while I covered most of the bills. He was silent again, but this time, it wasn't hesitation. It was shame, because he knew I was right. I didn't wait for him to come up with another excuse. I told him to pack a bag and leave. He tried to act hurt, as if I was being dramatic, as if he was the victim in all of this, but I saw the truth for what it was. Lucas had never truly been on my side. He had never been neutral in this situation. He had been standing behind Elaine the entire time, letting her lead the charge while he pretended he was just an innocent bystander caught in the middle. I wasn't falling for it anymore. Lucas moved out that night. I heard later that he went straight to Elaine's house, which was probably the safest place for him, considering the way the town was starting to turn on them. Elaine must have realized her online smear campaign wasn't working, because a few days later, she escalated her tactics again. I was in the middle of prepping for the lunch rush when I saw an official-looking envelope on my desk, one that had been hand-delivered instead of arriving in the mail. I knew, before I even opened it, that it was something Elaine had cooked up. I pulled out the letter and immediately burst out laughing. Elaine had actually filed a trademark claim against my bakery's name. She was trying to claim ownership, insisting that the entire concept had been her idea, that she had played a pivotal role in the branding and development of my business. In the letter, her lawyer demanded that I either pay her licensing fees or transfer over partial ownership of the bakery immediately. The sheer delusion was astonishing. Elaine had never even baked a cake in her entire life. She had no idea how to run a business, no idea what it took to manage employees, no concept of how much work and sacrifice had gone into this place. And yet, she was bold enough to claim that she had been the true mastermind behind it all. Mark didn't even sound surprised when I called him. "She's getting desperate," he said, sounding bored, like this was just another ridiculous case he had to handle before lunch. "She knows she can't win this, but she's hoping you'll panic and settle just to avoid the hassle." "What do I do?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "You don't give her a single damn thing," he said. "I'll handle the legal side. But if she's resorting to this, it means she's running out of options. She's throwing everything she has at you because she knows she's losing." That thought should have given me some relief. But Elaine wasn't the type to lose gracefully. The very next morning, a health inspector showed up unannounced. At first, I wasn't worried. Surprise inspections happen sometimes, and my bakery was immaculate. I had nothing to hide, no violations to be concerned about. But the inspector wasn't acting like this was a normal checkup. He went over everything twice, then a third time, his expression tight with suspicion, like he had already made up his mind about what he was going to find. When he finally pulled me aside, his tone was almost apologetic. "We've received multiple anonymous complaints about serious health violations," he said carefully. "Expired ingredients, food being left out overnight, and reports of rodent infestations." I actually felt my eye twitch. Rodents? My bakery was spotless. I had never had a single issue with pests. This was Elaine's most pathetic stunt yet. The inspector must have seen the fury on my face, because he quickly added, "We didn't find anything. But if we keep receiving reports, we'll be required to keep following up." I took a slow breath, steadying myself, because I was dangerously close to losing my composure. Elaine wasn't just harassing me anymore. She was trying to destroy me. That night, Lucas called again, his voice full of forced exhaustion, like he was tired of dealing with me. "Mom says she didn't do it," he said, as if that settled anything. "You're being paranoid. If you just sit down and apologize to her, maybe all of this could go away." I hung up on him mid-sentence. I wasn't playing defense anymore. Elaine thought she was untouchable, that she could sabotage my business, ruin my reputation, and get away with it because she was used to manipulating people into submission. She had underestimated the wrong person. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to make sure she regretted ever starting this war in the first place. I had spent weeks trying to defend myself while Elaine attacked from every angle, but that ended the moment I hung up on Lucas. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I wasn't waiting for the next blow to land, bracing myself for whatever pathetic stunt Elaine would try next. I was done reacting. I was going to end this completely. Elaine thought she could bully me into submission, that if she applied enough pressure, I would break down and give her what she wanted. She thought I would crack under the stress, that I would be too afraid of the damage she was doing to fight back. She believed she was untouchable because she had gotten away with manipulating people for years, but she had made one fatal mistake. She underestimated me. The moment I realized Elaine had no intention of stopping, I made one phone call, and that call set everything in motion. My brother Mark had a close friend in local journalism, the kind of reporter who lived for a scandal, someone who loved digging up dirt on people who thought they could get away with anything. He didn't just pass along my story. He handed her a goldmine of evidence. Screenshots of Elaine's fake reviews, documents proving she had tried to steal my business name, legal paperwork showing that she had no legal claim to my bakery. The bogus health complaints, the smear campaign on Facebook, the fact that she had tried to open a competing bakery across the street that didn't even exist. Elaine had been so sure of herself, so confident that she was untouchable, that she never even tried to cover her tracks. The reporter didn't just take the story. She ran with it like it was the biggest scandal of the year. While she worked on the article, I kept gathering proof. I saved every nasty text message Lucas had sent me, every time he had tried to manipulate me into giving Elaine what she wanted. I pulled every customer complaint that matched the fake reviews and compiled a timeline of harassment so airtight that no one could possibly look at the situation and believe Elaine's side of the story. Then, just when I thought I had all the evidence I needed, Elaine made one final mistake. She started telling people that she was launching her own bakery right across the street from mine, going as far as posting about it on Facebook like it was already happening. She posted mock-ups of a logo, a name that was suspiciously close to mine, and wrote a long dramatic post about how she was finally following her passion. Elaine's idea of baking was putting frozen cookie dough in the oven and pretending she had made something from scratch. The woman had never run a business in her life, and she was claiming that she was about to open a bakery to rival mine. It was laughable. More importantly, it was the perfect final nail in the coffin. What Elaine hadn't realized was that she had never actually filed any paperwork for a real business. The building she claimed to be moving into was still under contract with another company. She hadn't applied for a single permit, hadn't secured a lease, hadn't done anything except run her mouth. She had lied to the entire town, hoping that just the threat of opening a competing business would be enough to scare me into giving her what she wanted. She thought she was playing a game of intimidation. She had no idea that I was about to drop a bomb on her entire life. The reporter called me 2 days before the article was set to publish, her voice brimming with excitement. "This is going to be bigger than I thought. I found out even more than what you gave me." I leaned forward at my desk, heart pounding. "What did you find?" She let out a low laugh, the kind people make when they've just uncovered something juicy. "Turns out, Elaine has a bit of a history of investing in family businesses. This isn't the first time she's pulled something like this." I didn't even have to ask what that meant. Elaine had done this before. She had tried to weasel her way into businesses that weren't hers, convinced herself that she was owed a piece of someone else's success, and when that didn't work, she burned it all down out of spite. It had just never been this public before. Until now. 2 days later, the article went live, and it was worse for Elaine than I ever could have imagined. The headline alone was enough to destroy her reputation completely. Local bakery owner targeted in bitter family feud, fake reviews, false claims, and a phantom rival business. It wasn't just a short write-up. It was an exposé. The journalist had interviewed customers, employees, even other business owners in town who had witnessed Elaine's behavior firsthand. She laid out the entire timeline, From the moment Elaine demanded ownership, to the smear campaign, to the bogus health complaints, to the fake bakery stunt. Screenshots of Elaine's Facebook posts were included. Quotes from people she had manipulated were front and center. Even Lucas's text messages, the ones where he tried to negotiate for Elaine, were in there. Elaine had spent weeks trying to turn the town against me, and in the span of a single morning, she had been completely exposed. The fallout was immediate. People started commenting on Elaine's old Facebook posts, calling her a liar, asking how she could treat her own daughter-in-law like this. A few of her friends tried to defend her, but the overwhelming response was that she had been caught red-handed, and there was no coming back from it. The article spread so fast that by the afternoon, the local news station picked it up. Elaine had gone from being the poor, mistreated mother-in-law to the town's most despised woman in less than 24 hours. Lucas tried to call me that evening, but I didn't pick up. Instead, he sent a pathetic text, as if he still thought this was something that could be negotiated. Mom says she's willing to back off if you agree to give her 10% and stop the legal stuff. The absolute gall of that man. I didn't even bother responding. Elaine wasn't in a position to negotiate anything. She had already lost completely, and the next move was mine. I had waited long enough for justice. It was time to finish this completely. The day after the article dropped, I thought maybe Elaine would finally get the message, that she would see how completely she had destroyed herself and just crawl back into whatever hole she came from. I thought she might lay low, let things die down, and try to quietly salvage what was left of her reputation. But I had underestimated just how far gone she was. That evening, someone pounded on my door, not a polite knock, not a hesitant tap, but a full-fledged demand for attention. I already knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Elaine stood on my porch, shoulders rigid with fury, her face twisted into something almost unrecognizable. Behind her, Lucas hovered in the background, looking exhausted, like he had aged years in a single day. He wasn't alone, either. His two sisters were there, both of their husbands, and even Elaine's best friend, a woman who had spent weeks attacking me online in the name of family loyalty. It looked like some kind of intervention, except instead of trying to save me, they had shown up to force me to surrender. Elaine marched inside without waiting for permission, her heels clicking against the floor like a queen storming into her throne room, radiating entitlement despite the fact that her entire world was crumbling around her. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She went straight for the attack. "You've embarrassed this family publicly," she spat, voice dripping with venom, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "Do you even realize what you've done?" Lucas stood awkwardly behind her, eyes avoiding mine, his posture tense like he was just waiting for this to go south. I folded my arms, keeping my voice calm and measured. "I didn't do anything, Elaine. You humiliated yourself. I just told the truth." Elaine's eyes flashed dangerously, her breathing shallow with rage. But before she could unleash whatever pathetic rant she had prepared, Lucas finally spoke. And for the first time in weeks, it wasn't directed at me. "Mom, stop." Elaine whipped around to face him, her face twisting in disbelief, like she couldn't comprehend what she had just heard. "What did you just say?" Lucas ran a hand down his face, looking like he hadn't slept since the article went live, like he had been carrying the weight of this mess for so long that it was finally crushing him completely. "Stop," he repeated, his voice flat, lifeless, resigned. "It's over. You ruined everything. You took it too far, and now everyone knows the truth." Elaine blinked at him, genuine shock flashing across her face, like she had never even considered the possibility that he might turn against her. "Gregory, don't you dare act like this is my fault," she snapped, her voice dangerously sharp, her hands gesturing wildly as if she could somehow rewrite reality itself if she just said the right words. Lucas stared at the floor, shaking his head slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It is your fault, Mom. You pushed this. You wanted half her business. You started the fake reviews. You made the health complaints. You tried to open a bakery that didn't even exist." Elaine's face contorted, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for a response. But for the first time since this all started, she had nothing to say. And then, In the most unexpected twist of all, she did something I had never seen before. She cried. Not the fake, dramatic tears she used when someone denied her attention. Not the manipulative sniffles she pulled when she wanted to guilt people into submission. These were ugly, furious, desperate tears. Her hands shook, her voice cracked, and when she spoke again, it wasn't anger that filled the room. It was pure self-pity. I built this family, she choked out, tears streaking down her face, her chest rising and falling erratically. You think any of you would have anything without me? I kept us together. I made you who you are. And now you're turning against me? Over her. She gestured wildly toward me, her voice breaking completely, her carefully constructed reality falling apart in front of her eyes. But the most telling part wasn't her words. It was the way nobody moved to comfort her. Not Lucas, not his sisters, not even her best friend, the woman who had defended her online relentlessly for weeks. Elaine had built her entire identity around the belief that she was the glue that held her family together, but in this moment, it was clearer than ever. She had never been holding them together. She had been holding them hostage. And now, they were finally free from her grip. Elaine stormed out, slamming the door behind her so hard that the pictures on my walls rattled, her wounded pride the only thing she had left. Lucas lingered, his posture tense, uncertain, like he didn't know what to do next. He finally lifted his head, looking at me for the first time in what felt like forever, and in a voice that was softer than I expected, he said, I don't know where to go. I met his gaze, unflinching, and I gave him the only answer that mattered. That's not my problem. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just nodded slowly, like he finally understood how badly he had screwed up, and then he walked away, following his mother into whatever mess awaited them next. The next morning, Elaine deleted her Facebook account. All the public support she had once had was gone, drowned out by people who had seen the truth for what it was. The people who had believed her lies at first had either turned against her or were too embarrassed to defend her any longer. Lucas moved back in with her. At least, that's what I heard through mutual friends. I didn't ask. I didn't care. Meanwhile, my bakery had never been busier. People started coming in just to support me, ordering more than usual, leaving generous tips, telling me how glad they were that I had stood my ground. Customers who hadn't been in months showed up, giving me hugs, promising to recommend my business to everyone they knew. But when I went home at night, I realized something strange. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I had won. I just felt done. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't just Elaine I had lost. It was the man I had married, the person I had once trusted, the person I had believed would protect me. I had spent years thinking Lucas was on my side, but the truth was right there all along. He had never been my partner. He had been his mother's son first. Some of my friends told me I should forgive him, that he had just been caught up in Elaine's manipulations, that he hadn't known how to handle the pressure she put on him. But he had known exactly what she was doing, and he had let it happen anyway. I didn't just lose a husband. I lost the illusion that he had ever truly been mine. But I had gained something better. Freedom.